I often used to go before to Atwater Market, and then finally a friend of mine who has a stand there, he said to me, he said, Steve, he said, there's only two of the vendors there that it's their actual own produce. Everything else comes from Central Market. So that's really interesting. And I remember I ran out of potatoes one time. And so I went at the market and I bought more potatoes. So when my wife cooked them, my kid said to my wife, she said, Ista, what's the matter with these potatoes? They don't even taste any good. So there's a difference between homegrown and what you get at the market. But I know in St. Anne de Bellevue, most of the vendors that are there, it's all their own local produce. So if you want to support it, they're still kind of local from here when they have their market going on. And they also have a big garlic festival too, I think in the third week of August. But there's a place, until we can get more things going in our community, it's going to happen. So, and when he was talking about growing in places, so I just want to quickly say that I remember in 1969, there was two world events that happened, or at least in my lifetime. Some of you might be younger. Well, one was Woodstock. My father wouldn't let me go to see Jimi Hendrix. He said, how are you going to get there? Well, I'm going to walk. But I was 11 at that time. And the other thing was, my grandfather was watching TV. And that's what the man landed on the moon. And I remember my grandfather sitting there in his rocking chair in front of the TV. And the first thing he said, they got no business to go to the moon. And then after that, he said, the weather's going to change. That's what he said. It's going to happen because they went to the moon. And he said, they got no business to go on those high mountains. So what is this relationship to what I want to tell you? So in the last 2 years, just before the COVID started, I got a communication from a professor in McGill to work on a project to grow food on the moon. And so he organized a Zoom with First Nations people, so I was part of it. So I told them what my grandfather told me. We got no business to go to the moon. I'm going to tell you that now. But he just reached out to me again about a month ago. So they're still going to continue with a project to grow food on the moon. But where I think we should have projects to grow food here on Earth, forget about the moon. But now they're even talking about going to Mars. So they're really getting far out. But that's interesting. So anyways, I want to introduce our last presenter of this workshop. Is Ryan Young. He's a city councilor from St. Anne de Bellevue. And I know in St. Anne de Bellevue, they have a beautiful bike path or trail. And they have fruit trees all along this bike trail. And it's maintained by their city workers. So I thought with the things, with all the talk in our community to go back to these type of things, this would be excellent that we get a lot of good information on that. And so how a local community such as MCK could support these things and make them happen. I know I was at a meeting the other day, and a person talked about, well, they tried to grow fruit trees here before, and they got broken. Well, maybe that was before, but we can't just give up, and we got to still continue. And I think the more that we stress about community, and the old Mohawk way has to come back. I can tell every one of you in here that is missing a lot, or it's not strong enough. It's respect. And this is the truth. And until we can build this back and follow those words of peace, power, and righteousness, it's got to begin with respect. And we have to look at community. We all have to be examples the best that we can. And I'm like my cousin over here, Larry. He has the most beautiful front lawn. He doesn't have a lawn. He has beautiful flowers and everything. I always believe that, We should have a garden instead of a front lawn. But in COVID, in the United States, there were people who planted in their front yard and they got arrested. That's one thing. But there's other places in the world you're not even allowed. The army will come there and chop down your field, set it on fire, run it over with elephants or army tanks, and have you in prison. This is the truth. And Ramses knows that. This is the truth. This is a reality, what goes on there. And with things getting more tighter and difficult in the world, we got to really, really step up and become more reliant on ourselves, and we could do it. Just all the beautiful people here and the beautiful minds that we have here, we can do it. I'm really happy to see these young people here from the KCI. They've been very deeply involved and self-committed. And in order to get that position, they had to qualify, but they have the qualifications behind them because they really believe and do those things. And so that's a great thing. We have a young person, Brooke Rice, who's been very involved in a lot of things that are in your community. And I'm very happy about that. And everybody else, Val, that I know for a while, all those things, people, that's it. And we can develop a trade amongst ourselves, and that's one of the bigger visions of what I have, even with other communities, that's what they're beginning to do, and we're going to have to, and there's a fine example with the farmers market. We used to have that here in Ganawage. We even used to have a big agricultural fair, and we're going to have a green corns festival. I don't know what the name is going to be called. An agricultural fair when?
August 19th.
Excellent. And there you are. So these things are going to happen. I know that at the council, I talked to Joe Delarone about it, and he was really excited. And he says, Steve, he says, you should have a contest even for the kids. He says, where maybe they'll grow the ugliest tomato and they'll have the first prize, or a three-legged carrot, and things that are unusual. I remember when they used to have a giant pumpkin contest years ago, and I remember a long time ago, Sonny Joe Cross. He used to do a lot of things to initiatives for the young people in our community, and those ways got to come back. We're all at, we say we care, so we got to show, and it's a good start. It's a good start.
We switched from the heaviest pumpkin to the heaviest zucchini
Okay.
in Pandanega, and then we also do the vegetable monster. So like your scariest vegetable, and that's for the kids.
Wow. I know in the Italians had the long zucchini or gourd, and they were hanging from their balconies, and I think it was about 100 and something inches long, so it was about 6-7 feet. So there's things like that could happen. And the thing is that you can make it all fun. That's what it is. It's about being fun. It can't be too serious. Did you ever see me being serious? No. So actually I'm learning to do the moonwalk myself, because now I'm going to be planting on the moon. Without further ado, Mr. Ryan Young.
All right, well, I'm very honored to be here. And I want to thank the Mohawk Council of Ganawage and the Food Sovereignty Ganawage Collective Impact for sponsoring this and for having me here. I want to start off with this story because, I'm going to talk a lot about planting trees in my community. And it all started in 2005 for me personally. I mean, I guess I was planting some trees before then. But the first time that I got a grant from, I think it was Tree Canada, it was actually an Indigenous person in my community. They weren't Mohawk. I think they might have been Abenaki, but she said to me, she was a student at McDonald campus, and she said, that there's this grant available from Tree Canada and you can get money to plant trees and you should apply. And she said, and you should do like a community exchange with Ganawage. And I was like, wow, great idea. And we did do that. And so this is a picture of when we planted a white pine in St. Anne. So we came to Ganawage, we planted trees from the grant here in Ganawage. We went to all the schools, I think it was, that there was, different schools, the Catholic school, but then also the language nest school. And then we planted a white pine in our park by the water. And you know, we chose a white pine on purpose because it's the tree of peace. And Eva Johnson was there, and Mike DeLille, and a few others, which I can't remember their names now. But you know, that's where it started for me in terms of planting trees in my community. And then years later, I finally made it happen that we put a plaque up to commemorate the fact that we planted a white pine in honor of the Mohawk Nation. And it's in 3 languages. It's translated into Mohawk as well, or into Kanien'kehá:ka. So it's English, French, and Kanien'kehá:ka. So I'm a counselor in St. Anne de Bellevue. That's kind of like what our municipal boundaries look like. You got the old village of St. Anne de Bellevue, and then you have kind of a development that happened in the 80s and 90s. So it's more like a real suburb, where the town down here is more older. And then you have the campus, McDonald campus and John Abbott College. And then you've got a lot of land that, you know, is not developed. It's farmland that is either owned by McGill, or it's forest that's owned by McGill, like, for example, the Arboretum. Or in this area here, which is the L'Anse Lorme area, it's land that we've slowly fought to protect, that was all threatened by being developed. And that's why I got involved in politics, really, was to try and save all the woods that were in here. And we were pretty successful. We basically protected it all. And because we're on the island of Montreal, and Montreal has an interest in protecting green space on the whole island, they came in and they bought a lot of it, right? But we kind of held off the developers for a while to give it time to happen. So I'm very happy that happened. And some people like to call me a radical, but you know, the origin of the word radical really goes back to the word for root, right? So it's all about plants. And me in general, I always like to look at everything in the world based on, well, where does this come from? Let's go back to the root of this. Why is this here? You know, and I think that's a great way to approach life. So I never really talked a little bit about myself. I mean, you know, Stephen introduced me, but yeah, I'm a city councilor in St. Anne. I'm also a teacher at John Abbott College, and I teach in the film, television, and radio type program. But you know, my passion is the environment. So I kind of work as a teacher, and then I have my summers off, and in the summer I'm just in the garden, or I'm planting trees, or I'm bird watching, or whatever, you know, and I really, like, that's my raison d'etre, you know. It's communing with nature. And so, you know, I'm lucky that in St. Anne de Bellevue, there is a lot of nature still. If you compare it with the rest of the island of Montreal, you know, there's still a lot of green space, a lot of forest. And of course, we're neighbors with Centerville, where Ramsey's Farm is. Ramsey's Farm is right around here. And then you've got Cap Saint Jacques, which has an ecological farm that is run by a nonprofit, but it's land owned by Montreal. And then you've got the campus over here, which is teaching agriculture. But a lot of it is the kind of conventional industrial approach to agriculture. Some people have kind of this rosy picture of McDonald campus as being like sort of quasi-organic. But no, they're spraying glyphosate on their corn, and they're growing genetically engineered corn. And they get money from Monsanto. You know, they get research money. And so there's very few actual big shots in terms of professors that are doing anything related to organic. There's the 1 or 2 little people that do these little things. But then a lot of the students that come to go to school at McDonald campus, they go there because they care about the environment and they want to do organic stuff. So then, you know, we benefit in St. Anne de Bellevue because a lot of these students try and start little organic projects. And of course, they're getting bigger and bigger. And in a way, you know, we talked about a farmer's market. That's how our farmer's market started, is there were students at McDonald campus that wanted to, they saw this little nice, quaint little village, St. Anne's, and they thought, well, you know, a farmer's market would work here. So they approached the city council at the time. They got the permission to do it. And at first, and you know, all these things that I'm going to talk about, some of them were a fight. It was not easy. We always had a lot of pushback from the community. When it comes to our farmers market, we still have a merchants association. So that's the businesses on the main street that still would rather see the market go away. And they complain that they are unfairly competing with the businesses because the businesses pay taxes and the market doesn't pay tax. But the market is there 1 day a week for about 5 hours and only during 6 months of the year. So how can you compare it to a business that occupies a building and is there 24/7, 365 days a year? But these are the things that you kind of have to deal with. So, you know, I think a lot of people, maybe they get intimidated by the challenges of doing some of these things. But if you push, and especially today, things have changed. It's so much easier. People are asking for these things, you know? But when we first set it up in, I think it was 2000 was the first year we had the farmers market. It was this small little thing, and but now it's really big. And if anyone, like Brooke, I think Stephen was mentioning Brooke Rice, you know, Ramsey's an expert in setting up farmers markets because he sells at a farmers market. He's been on the board of the farmers market in St. Anne's. I would be happy to help because, you know, I can come at it from the perspective of the council. In terms of the history of the campus, you know, it was an agricultural campus starting way back in 1907, I think it was. And you know, it's a very interesting history if you look into it. The guy that started it, McDonald, he was the guy behind Export cigarettes, you know, like McDonald Tobacco. And he made all his money in tobacco. And then he decided to give away most of his money at a certain point, and he got really interested in education. And he had been banned from his family because he refused to become a priest. So you know that thing where the one son has to go off to the priesthood? So he refused, and his father basically kicked him out. He grew up in PEI, and his father was a rich landowner in PEI, so he was cut off from the money. So he had to kind of build up his own thing, and he joined, I think, with a brother. And what they did is during the U.S. Civil War is that the North was cut off from the tobacco from the South. So they went from Montreal, went to the South, bought the tobacco, brought it back up, and then sold it to the North. And so they became, yeah.
They were smugglers.
That's it. They were smugglers, just like the Bronfmans. Yeah. That's it. So anyways, he made his money that way, and then he decided to donate it all to various things, including educational things like this. But his vision for the campus was, I think he really didn't like the church, and he wanted rural people to turn away from the church and more like approach farming from a more, you know, educated way or scientific way. So it's an interesting history, and McGill would rather get rid of the farm. You know, yes, they're not doing the type of farming that I would like to see happen there, but they're starting to change, and I think they might change more. But the interesting thing is that McDonald put it in the deed for the land that they could never not have a working farm at the campus, because McGill would rather just not have a working farm. It's a hassle for them. So, but every time they've tried to sneak out of it, the family that still kind of takes care of the estate of Mr. McDonald, they say, no, you have to keep it a farm.
Maybe they would give it to the Vanawami Mohawk.
That's right. Well, you know, and
You be paid back for the loan?
Yeah.
well, you know, I have to point out that like Trina Delormier, I don't know if you know her, she's at the Center for Indigenous Nutrition and the Environment, which is on McDonald campus. And I really think you know, you have that on the campus. Why not start a Mohawk or Ganegahaga farm on the campus? They've got the
You have to
land.
re-expropriate the land.
That's right. And I know there's all these complexities, but to me, it's an obvious, you know, an obvious connection maybe to be made. But of course, it all should be re-expropriated. Exactly. So I'm just going to jump ahead through some of this. So we one of the first things we did in the town is we started a community garden. And so there's 24 plots at a park called Parc Godin. And I think you have to pay $5 a year to have your plot. There's a long list of people wanting to have a plot. So we really need to find more space for people to garden. But there's at least this. We named it the Jardin Communautaire Michel Couillard because he was one of the first people to help set it up, and then he died, so we named it after him. But it's basically all organic, and you know, we have like a meeting every year where maybe if people, like for a while we weren't letting people grow potatoes, which I never understood, but it's because they didn't want to have the Colorado potato beetle establish itself. And I said, well, you know, you can still grow potatoes even if the Colorado potato beetle goes after your potato plants. You just don't get the best production, but whatever, you still get potatoes. So now we're going to be growing potatoes again. But you know, even this project where the park is quite big and this garden makes up, you know, maybe 1/4, 1/5, maybe even 1/6 of the total area of the park. A lot of the people that lived around there were against the project, and they said, you're going to be taking space away from our children who play in the park. Even though there is you know, like a whole, you know, jungle gym for them to play in, and there's still a big green open field for them to run around in. But you know, we had to push and push and push, and sometimes we still get these attitudes. But one thing that we did try and do, but we're not doing it anymore, but I did it in a way to try and get people to accept the garden more, is I said one plot will always be dedicated to the food bank. So we'll plant, volunteers will plant stuff, and then that fresh food will go to the food bank every year, every week or whatever, every couple of weeks that it's available and so on. So we did that for a few years, but eventually we stopped.
I was just
Yeah.
talking with somebody, and I don't know if it was you, Larry, or who, but you're talking about community gardens. I started one a long time ago, and it's not big enough to feed the community. I said, no, but you get the seeds and you bring it home and you start your own garden. And then now we're talking about different plots where the individual will go there, they'll get their little plot and they'll plant what they want. But now I'm thinking you make it into one big garden, and maybe if somebody wants to participate, they have to pull a thing out of their hat and say, oh, you're gonna plant carrots this year. And then, so everybody you get to decide what you wanna plant, but that one person will focus just on carrots, and then the next year they'll be able to grow something else. And then it teaches them how to grow different things.
Right.
And then instead of having 5 plots with tomatoes, you'll have one little area where you have tomatoes for everybody. And I don't know.
And then you distribute it equally to everyone. I think that's interesting because, of course, as a gardener, you tend to grow the things that you're familiar with, and you don't often explore other things that you've never grown.
And then he gets them to go out of their box and learn something different. But then I think maybe the yield will be higher instead of a little plot where you have your one tomato and they have their one tomato.
For
you have
sure.
a section, and that 1 or 2 people are dedicated to it, and they grow just tomatoes. And then maybe it'd be like a competition. You know, like how much yield can you have?
For sure. I mean, we have had situations where some plot owners get into disputes with the neighboring plot owner and stuff. And,
Yeah,
but
so
you know,
get them more together and
that's it.
have some kind of more of a cooperative.
For sure. For sure. So here's a picture of our farmers market, which happens by the water. It wasn't always by the water, and since it's moved by the water, it makes it even more, I think, special and enjoyable because you're shopping and then you look out and you see the waterfront. But it's a little ring road that goes through that area. So the town has to put up no parking signs basically the night before, and has to make sure that if somebody didn't read the memo, that their car is towed to be ready in time to set up the market. And it happens starting the first week, the first Saturday in May, and it goes basically to the last Saturday in October, pretty much. And then we have a winter farmers market, but the town is not involved in that one because the space is rented from a local church, an Anglican church, and it's in the basement of that church. It's much smaller. But when it continues into November or in the first part of November, there's still lots of fresh stuff coming out. But Dan Brisebois, who spoke this morning, that's the back of his head right there. And that's, he doesn't sell at the St. Anne's Farmers Market anymore, but his farm were the first vegetable farm that was selling at the farmers market. In a way, the farmers market was almost built around them as the center. Yes.
Does the farmer's market include other items like crafts and?
Yes. So here you bring.
Smoked meats,
Yeah.
bacon?
Yeah. No, it has developed over time. There's been people that like order fish from Lake Huron and then they smoke it themselves and then they sell the smoked fish at the market. We would love to have more things like jewelry and that kind of thing, but this is one of the complaints that we get from the Merchants Association. That they say you shouldn't be selling anything else but food, and you shouldn't even be selling prepared food because our restaurants sell prepared food. So you're like diverting business away from our restaurants.
Well, then they shouldn't be selling food that is fresh.
I know, that's it. And we did a study once and we demonstrated that anyone that comes to the market, because we have a lot of people that come from outside the town.
They end up going in the store.
That's it. They make secondary purchases right there in the town. And we proved it, but you'll still get the same kind of on repeat criticisms that are not well
And the
founded.
reason is, I know he spent $20 in the market. He could have spent it in my store.
That's it. And when we just lost our one grocery store, we're hoping that it reopens. But now this is our only source of fresh food for now in the
Couldn't
town.
city run that grocery store?
I would like to look at that kind of an option if things don't, if something doesn't solve itself sooner. But
It's a community.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a co-op.
that's it. I definitely want to look at that option. Yeah.
I like the market. I've been a few
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
I went to the garlic festival.
Right.
It was nice. They had the yard sales coincide with the garlic festival. So it was like a whole. And
A
then
whole thing.
I went to a restaurant.
There you go.
I sat outside. It was nice.
That's it.
I didn't. There was the one food vendor, but
Nice.
yeah, the bread and it was nice. They had
Nice.
black garlic. It was
Nice.
so good.
When Ganawagi has it, I'd like to show up and bring some homemade bacon and some homemade ham.
Yeah.
But not to make a profit out of it.
Right.
Just, you're interested in, do you like it?
Right.
I can teach you how to bake it.
Right.
Because
Right.
it's not really that hard.
But
Right.
you're gonna have a
You need a
booth at our
calculator.
agricultural fair.
And we used to do food demos or cooking demos. My wife used to do some of them where she would say, come and see what I did with the products of the market. So she'd take a product like a vegetable from this farmer and then like a sauce from that farmer and prepare like a meal right there that people would taste. And people would taste it and they'd be able to take the recipe and they know that that product is at that stand, that product is at that stand, and then they go and make so if you have to have a good cook. My wife is one of the best.
And that's,
So-
I hate commercially made bacon and ham, only for the fact that the salt content is so high.
Right.
So my bacon and my ham is 7% maximum.
I'd like to try your bacon. But you know, one other thing I was going to say about that, I forgot my train of thought now. Maybe I'll come back to it. So I can talk more about the market, but I wanted to talk about trees, planting fruit trees, having a public orchard. And really all the stuff that I learned about that stuff goes back to this guy, Ken Taylor, from used to be called the Ferme Point du Moulin or Windmill Point Farm. And now his business is called Green Barn. Now this guy, he's much more friendlier with his plants than he is with people. But you know, he was not easy to get to know and get along with earlier on, and I had to impress him with my plant knowledge. Then he was like, "Oh, you know how to identify that plant? Oh, maybe I'll speak to you." You know. But I ended up being like an apprentice on his farm, and I worked on his farm for about 2 years, and then I decided I'm going to make a film about him. So then I made a film about his farm. And it's called Organic Prophecies, and you can watch it on the NFB website, but only if you have the campus subscription. So if you can, if you're a student at a university or college, you just put in your student number or whatever, and you can watch it. Or if you're an employee, or but it's out there. But anyways, this guy, he's kind of like an ideas guy. He always knows what's the best tree to plant for this particular thing. He's always all of a sudden something is not supposed to grow here, and all of a sudden it's growing amazing at his farm. So he has some spiritual power with plants, and he talks to them or whatever. But like pawpaws. Does anybody know pawpaws? Pawpaws are an indigenous fruit. They're not really native this far north, but they can grow this far north. And he's got pawpaws growing amazing at his farm.
I dispute
now.
now.
Yeah. Right, but before. So that's the other thing. And that's the other thing that I have tried to do in my town is I have made the argument, and I've even gotten grants from these tree granting organizations saying, we're going to plant the things that are going to do well here because the climate is warming. So if you look at the range of this particular tree, it's going to move this far north. So now we can plant this tree here, and the plant that originally did well here, now it's not. Its range is going to move farther north. So there's a lot of that. But Ken Taylor, he taught me all these things about fruit trees, and then when we finally had this idea about this bike path. We have this bike path, and Montreal kind of built it because they kind of are responsible for these bike paths on the island of Montreal. But the town, the individual town like St. Anne's has to say, yes, you can build it through here. And they have to usually do the legal stuff of if there's land that it has to cross over, they have to get the legal right away and all that. But when Montreal builds it, they kind of build it and then they leave it and that's it. And sometimes they'll plant some stuff along it, but it's this stretch of grass on either side of a path that is now kind of like a place where you can plant things. So we came up with this idea. We're going to line this bike path for it's probably by now it's more like 5 kilometers long, but we started with I guess like a 1 kilometer stretch of it, and started to fill it with fruit trees. And we applied for money for the program, which doesn't exist anymore, but that organization still gives money. TD, Friends of the Environment Foundation, they had a program called Maru Mes Arbres, and they gave us, I think, $10,000, and we planted all these fruit trees. And, we had volunteers often do a lot of the planting, and we had city workers as well, and the city workers would bring the soil and we would plant all these trees. Now, some of them don't survive, so you learn, and since the money was coming from this granting organization, me as a counselor, I never had an issue with the town administration saying to me, oh, you're wasting our money. Well, it's not our money, we got this grant. And then when you get this grant, they're kind of forced to spend the money and make it happen. So I always kind of tried to do that. I would get this grant or this money from elsewhere, and that would, in a way, just, there wouldn't be an argument about how this is going to work out, you know? Because even if they all die, it doesn't matter, right? Didn't hurt the city. So anyways, a lot of the stuff did really well. And so this is kind of a variety of what we have. Asian pears, which really were, you know, something that guy Ken Taylor started to grow a lot of and popularize. And for whatever reason, these Asian pears do really well in this climate, and they don't get too many insect pests. Like an apple can get really destroyed by an insect pest, but I'm not saying they never get insect pests, but they're much more resilient. And you can have trees that just have picture perfect Asian pears, and they're totally organic. They weren't sprayed at all, right? And I didn't even use pheromone tricking things, and you know.
Maybe pears in general, because we have several pear trees
Right.
that are just out there and nobody,
They just,
have them growing.
that's it.
They've
Now-
got beautiful pears.
Absolutely. Now, European pears often, it's hard to guess when they're going to be ripe, and you're supposed to pick them and then let them ripen at home. But the nice thing about Asian pears is you can just, when they're ready, you just pick them off the tree and eat them right there. So we also have a lot of service berries. In French, they're amélanchiers, or some people call them June berries. Plums, sour cherries, some sort of sweet. European pears, apples, currants, raspberries, blackberries, Hascap berries. Pawpaw, we haven't made any pawpaws yet, but they're flowering, and they take a while to mature before they're going to make pawpaws anyways. And then sea buckthorn and grapes. And you know, there were things like we decided to plant all these grapevines all along our fence, our frost fences along the bike path. Every single one of them died, you know. Like sometimes these things don't work out. And the other issue we had was the grass cutting crew that was a separate company hired by the town to cut the grass along the bike path. They weren't informed that we had planted all these trees, and they just went with the, you know, and kind of killed a lot of stuff.
They may not be dead, the grapes, because I did the same thing,
Right.
and they died.
They come back.
I thought.
Yeah,
And then there's these grapes growing
Yeah.
now.
it's true. It's true.
The root kind of hibernates for a while.
For sure, for sure. So there I am eating an Asian pear. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're bigger. You know, this is a peach tree. We tried this. The peach trees are so hard that it died. So we quickly learned, and we continue to learn, what does well and what doesn't. Yeah? Okay. And so, you know, these are sour cherries. Like, that's a pretty crazy abundant amount of sour cherries, and we had a strip of this going for, you know, 20 feet. So my wife and I, we go and pick sour cherries. I have another slide where we turn it into jam. But you can just eat them right there and then. They're, you know, and the thing about a fruit right off of the vine or right off the tree, I've always heard this, I don't know if it's true, but that it's hard for us to get sulfur in our bodies. And apparently something that you pick has sulfur in it for about 20 minutes, and then it goes out. So, you know, when you eat things right off the branch and off the vine, you're getting nutrients that you're not getting any other way.
Have you guys seen an increase in bird biodiversity since you've done this?
For sure. So, you know, that was the other idea of the project is, you know, we're not going to maintain it. It's going to be organic. It's going to be kind of quasi-wild. And so some of it's going to work out for people eating it, and some of it is probably not going to be that palatable. But wildlife loves it. You know, all the flowers that come out in the spring on these fruit trees attract tons of pollinators. And it attracts tons of birds. The birds eat the berries too. You know, like every time I go there, I see a little animal crawling all over to try, you know, whether they're eating something that's eating the fruit or whatever. It increases biodiversity. These are apples, you know, and this is the other thing I noticed, and I discovered this from doing this project, that fruit trees often have a boom and a bust cycle, right? So one year they produce a lot, and then another year they don't produce very much. And the commercial orchards, supposedly, they kill a certain amount of flower buds every year with pesticides to stop the boom and bust cycle, so that it's consistent throughout, so that they always have the same amount. But if you just leave a fruit tree go, you're going to get often, not always, but a year where very little fruit is there, and then another year where it's full. And if you do like we did, plant all this grand variety of different types of each individual fruit, and then so many different types of fruit, there's always going to be something that produces well that year, right? So it might be a bad year for apples, but it was a great year for plums or whatever. And I think that's the other interesting thing about it. So, these are all these photographs I took of the fruit that came right off of these trees. These are haskap berries. These are Mount Royal plums, a little plum like that. Early golden plums, which are crazy beautiful and delicious. But what I noticed with plums is a plum tree tends to do pretty well for about 10 years, and then it gets black knot and it dies. So if you're going to want plums, it seems to me you kind of gotta replant, and think about it as like a 10-year thing. Maybe every 5 to 10 years you're planting plums, and I wouldn't invest a lot of time and energy into them because of that reason. But they're really, when they produce, they're great, and they tend to make a lot of fruit. We have another variety. You can't see it well here, but Stanley plums. They're more like a pear-shaped thing, and they're big. But quite often, also, what has happened is people will see a plum tree like this, and they'll have that bluish, beautiful color to them, and they'll go and pick them, and they're not ready. They're hard as rock. They're inedible. And so, but that was always a risk with a project like this. The idea is first come, first serve, right? But we've seen people who will take everything off a tree and it's not ripe. And what was the point of that? But again, when you plant a lot of these things, and there's a guy, Zach Lokes, I'm going to talk a bit about him, but he wrote a book called The Edible Ecosystem Solution. And he farms kind of northwest of Ottawa. And in this book, he makes the case that we have all of these green lawns everywhere. And maybe not a green lawn at your house necessarily, but like a hospital has often a big space of green lawn. A college, a university, a school, and then you have these bike paths, and you have city parks. Why not create an edible ecosystem or an edible landscape that is always there for us, as a type of food security? Yes.
To help with the problem of people picking them before they're ripe, just implement the flagging system.
Right.
Put up signs every so often, red, not ripe. If it's flagged green, it's good to go.
For sure. What we did is we put up these little signs at the bottom of the tree that say what time of year it's ripe, and we put, please only take 30% of any, but some people listen to that, other people don't.
Most people don't even take the time to read it.
That's
the problem.
That's it. Yeah.
How do you bypass people's wasps?
Yeah. So I feel in this case, maybe that would be an issue in our parks, but we're starting to plant fruit trees in our parks anyways. And it's not a complaint I'm getting, but those were the kinds of things that people would bring up at the beginning.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
at the beginning.
So just say,
Wasps don't bother
forget
people.
it. Don't worry about it, and especially if it's in a little bit more of a rural area and most people are just biking past, it's not going to be. That's it. But I'm going to this area all the time. I've never been in a situation where I feel like, sure, there are fallen fruit on the ground and it attracts wasps, but I just walk around the wasps and pick the fruit that I want or whatever, and I've never been stung. That's it. That's it. Exactly. So haskap berries, they're becoming all the rage now, and you see them a lot in nurseries. And birds love these so much that they will eat every single one off of your tree or your bush. It's a bush before you get to them. So in some cases, I'm even going with a net and putting a net over some of these. Or if they're kind of companion planted in with something else bushy that kind of hides them, then the birds get at them less. But they are supposed to be higher in antioxidants than blueberries. They're just supposed to be so healthy for you. And they're a plant from Japan that we have an indigenous version here, but what they've done is they've crossed the two and made all these varieties and that are really good. Yeah.
I seen on the internet someplace, they put decoy fruit on the trees. So they look right, they look ready to go, the birds go, they hit them, like, they're stones. And then they don't realize that when the fruit is ripe, that they're fruit. They're afraid to hit their beaks again.
Right. Well, the bird that in particular eats these are cedar waxwings, and they just, they're beautiful. So again, you attract a beautiful bird.
They don't store very well, and they don't taste as good as blueberries.
Yeah, maybe that's right. In my personal opinion, certain varieties I feel taste as good as blueberries. Other varieties are more kind of bitter, but not in my opinion. Not the varieties I have. I have them in my backyard, and they're my favorite thing. Like, I am obsessed with Ascap berries. Okay, sour cherry jam. So we have a lot of sour cherries, and there's all kinds of varieties now. Again, the nurseries. There seems to be explosion in different cultivars of sour cherries. So, you got to get when you make jam, you got to get the pit out of them. But, it makes delicious jam. I'm still eating the jam now. Then there's mulberries, and mulberries tend to do very well as a tree. They don't seem to get any kind of bad diseases. They do tend to have branches that break off because they tend to grow out like this. And it seems like the branches are too heavy for them. And so they lose branches sometimes, but they recover, it seems, after that and continue to produce a lot. You again have to fight birds for these because the birds love to eat these. Squirrels love to eat them. But you can't really see here, but this is a mulberry tree here, about 10 feet tall. And it is loaded, literally like every inch there's a berry,
They're easy to start from seed too.
And they're easy to start from seed. That's what I've heard. And a lot of these trees you can even snip them, put some root powder on them, stick them in a little pot, or it's got to be often like Pro Mix or whatever. But you can start a lot of these things off just by, if there's one at the side of the road, go and take clippings. And I'm just starting to get to know some of these techniques and starting to experiment myself. But that's the other thing I like about the project is we kind of end up with this genetic storehouse of stuff that then people can go and take a little clipping off and go create one themselves. So service berries. I don't know how familiar you are with service berries or amelanchier or June berries, but these we've planted a little bit on the bike path, but it's a tree that I think really works as a park tree or a side of a street. They tend to not get very big, so if you're worried about a tree interfering with a hydro line or a telephone line or whatever, these are really the right size, and then they seem to be healthy. They don't seem to get affected by things very much, and they're like a blueberry, and they're kind of most ripe when they're purple. So you can pick them when they're kind of reddish, but there's some purple ones in there, and the purple ones are when they're really, really perfect. And I put them in muffins or scones, and they're amazing. And I find the seed tastes like almond, So like you're eating a fruit that tastes, or a berry that tastes like a blueberry, and then there's this aftertaste when you crunch into the seed, which is like almond. Yes?
Are they just as easy to propagate from a cutting as well?
Supposedly they are, but I haven't experimented with that.
Because if for anybody who's gonna walk here, when we did the revegetation for the NBC along that green space where they want to put the path, where we planted the trees, there's service berries in there. I particularly got service berries planted, and hopefully they don't get cut down.
Yeah. Well, and they also ripen in June. So they're one of the first kind of fresh fruits available. And so for me, it's kind of like Haskap berries, June berries, and then the next thing is sour cherries. And so they're like the first like really amazing, delicious thing to come from the trees that we have. And that's my daughter picking there. Currants, currants are just bushes. Oh, and by the way, those June berries, they come in cultivars that are trees, or they come in cultivars that are bushes too. So they've made like 20, 25 different varieties that I've seen in nurseries. So currants, there's red currants, black currants, and kind of, I guess they're white currants. And, they're more like a bush, a small bush. And they too, they seem to grow really well. They don't need, you can just plant them and then forget about them. And then eventually you get a lot of them. It takes time to pick them. Some of these things, they're not like super efficient for picking, so people don't want to bother. But, when somebody just wants to make some jam, you just go and pick some, right? Asian pears. So, and there's that little sign I talked about. We have these little metal signs at the bottom of the trees, not for every tree, but we say that it's edible. And because a lot of people will say, oh, I didn't know that was edible. There is that kind of thing like, I'm not sure if I should try this. And if those people want to think that way, that's great, because then I'm going to be there to get the fruit that they didn't take, or somebody else who really wants it. But the idea is to encourage people to pick it themselves. So Asian pears, as you can see, they look kind of immaculate. They produce a lot. They were a tree that originated from Korea. And I guess maybe the climate in Korea is similar to here. So quinces, quinces are difficult. Like you can't eat them raw. You have to cook them, and you can make quince paste. But we have some, and they have crazy beautiful flowers. I mean, just insanely beautiful flowers. They have a lot of thorns on them, so some people might want to avoid planting them in certain places. And yeah, that's right. And you're supposed to harvest them after the first or second frost. So after they go through a frost, they're kind of what's the best thing. And then you cook them and you make this quince paste from them. So here, we have years where voles, destroy trees. And, this particular year, I think it was about 4 years ago, we had a lot of losses. And even when we had guards, tree bark guards like that, to avoid this situation, they just ate above the guard all the way around. So the snow was so deep that, they were kind of, and it often happens in the late winter when these animals, they just need it or whatever. And so it can happen very fast, and if you have a high population of voles. But to me, it's just part of the scenario, right? So you lose some, you lose that one, you replant, you also learn. You learn you learn what survives, what doesn't survive, what they like to eat, what they don't like to eat. And I think there's a lot of learning there, and you benefit. So here I am picking Asian pears with my family. And this was a stretch by the bike path about 10 years ago, maybe, okay? We ended up taking this spot and turning it into a food forest. And that's that guy, Zach Lokes, who wrote this book. We hired him. We got another grant from Tree Canada, and we hired him to help us design a food forest. Like, it was Graham, right, that was here yesterday talking about. So it's the same approach. So there is Zach. We had some McDonald campus students come out and help us set it up. And the day that was one particular one. Another one, it was less students, more local people. And that was just a small group of us with 2 town workers and like a couple of tractors, some soil. And so we had the existing fruit trees, and then we created these rows of soil alongside the fruit trees, and then planted all these other things with the fruit trees. So with a food forest, the idea is you have the canopy layer, which is the tall trees. Then you plant shorter trees or dwarf fruit trees. Then you plant berry bushes, and then you could even have edible ground covers. So you could plant like thyme that spreads. You could put a rhubarb plant there, that's going to come back every year. You could plant chives, You could plant mint. The mint, of course, is going to get out of control, but eventually we ended up with a beautiful food forest. We had a sign put up. I'm going to come back to the sign, but that's what it looked like after about 2 or 3 years. Okay, so he also wanted to make it beautiful, so he added flowering plants. We put all this mulch in the middle, so you had a path to walk through in the middle. And, at any time of the growing season, there's something to eat in here. And that's the idea. And there's the other thing is putting in stuff that fixes nitrogen in the soil. So a honey locust tree is that kind of leguminous tree that does that. So does sea buckthorn, or you could plant clover. But the idea with the tree is there permanently, and its roots are always fixing nitrogen in the soil. There's a really cool farm in St. Anisette called Miracle Farms or Miracle Farm, Stefan Sabozniak or whatever. That's also his style, right? So if ever you wanted to see this in action on a bigger scale, you can go to his farm. This is another shot here of the food forest. And then, here's a family that was biking by. The kids stopped and they started to pick berries, And I just happened to see that when I was there, and I asked if I could take a picture. But that was the whole purpose of the project, was to create situations like that, That's in St. Anne de Bellevue on the way into the Arboretum. So where Des Pins crosses Chemin Sainte-Marie. And it's McGill property, but because St. Anne's had to get a right of way to put a bike path through, we have the right to do what we want with a certain distance from the bike path, right? So that's what allowed it to kind of happen. It kind of became our planting ground. Yeah.
We have a friend in Frelly who grows ice apples.
Oh yeah.
And one thing that he does to reduce and not use anything on his for the insects, because I'm still very junior with fruit trees, is tall grasses that are as high as the branches low, so that they touch, so that earwigs can get. Is it earwigs? I think it's earwigs. So one bug can get up and kill the bug that's actually. So the fact of the matter that something from the ground can climb up the grass and touch the tips of the tree to get onto the tree and do the job of balancing out the insect problem.
Very interesting. And that's the other idea, right? Is you're trying to imitate nature with a food forest. And the idea is you're going to attract the insects that also prey upon the other insects. And if you put flowering plants, you're going to get some more insects attracted. So, like in the early part of the year, like in May, the whole bike path is in flower. White flowers, pink flowers. And in this particular we did a little food forest strip here, and this is early on. And some of the things that we added in here were like rhubarb and asparagus. So we have asparagus that's coming up, amongst this little patch. So you can try to put in all these edible things, and it's just like I said, a first come, first serve. So these are pawpaws. So these are pawpaws from Ken Taylor's farm, and this is a flowering pawpaw on the bike path. So just to say, because I'm getting towards the end of my talk. The main thing I would say about this kind of thing, and this is what Ken Taylor, or a friend of Ken Taylor, once said to me, because his land itself, he's this like mad scientist that just planted every kind of variety of anything he could ever think of, And if you were ever like, stranded on his farm, at least if it was during the growing season, you would never starve because there's so much to eat. It's like you would get sick, with eating too much. And his friend said to me, spiritually, the diversity is so high. There's so many different things planted, and then you add what nature is already doing there as well, that spiritually you have all these spirits of these plants all together, and it kind of like changes the energy of the land, or makes it more vibrant or whatever. And I do feel that when I'm at his farm. So I feel that over time that we've done that in St. Anne de Bellevue, it has changed the energy of the town, It just changes the energy, from a spiritual level, but then you could even interpret it in a scientific way, because you could say, well, there's more smells that, the flowers have these different smells. So there's smells that people weren't smelling before. And then there's wildlife that's getting attracted to these things that maybe wasn't so obvious before or is new. And then there's all these taste sensations, right? All these things that people are tasting that they were not familiar with, And, people will walk down the middle of town and there'll be this little piece of ground with one little serviceberry tree sticking out, and I'll be there picking my fruit, and people will be walking by and looking at me like I'm some kind of freak. But some people will stop and say, what are you doing there? Like, what are you eating? And I'll say, well, try it. It's really good tasting berry. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, you start a conversation. And this person, you know them because they know this person, and it creates community, creates connections. And since this time, we do have a group. This is my only photograph of this. We have a park called the Harpel Park that was dedicated to John James Harpel, who was this pretty visionary guy who had this printing press in St. Anne's, who was also really into agriculture. And grew a lot of, had like a farm stand in this area and so on. But in this little corner over here, there's a group now that's called Permaculture St. Anne. And I don't really have much interaction with them, a little bit. We give them little bits of money every year from our green fund. But they have a whole little permaculture garden off to the side there that has sour cherry trees, and it has strawberries growing, and in amongst the strawberries, they do garlic, I think, and they have kale, and they have artichoke, and they've got all these things going on. So, and then after that, after using this municipal park space for that, then they spoke to this Anglican church that's not using their church property, and now they're starting to do gardens on that church property. So, these things kind of grow and grow. And even on the campus, you have the McDonald campus students that are also starting their own little clubs. For a little while, they had a permaculture club. And the idea, I think, or the challenge in St. Anne's is we're often our little individual things doing and we're not really always talking to each other. And if we all kind of pulled it all together, along with the expertise at the campus in fruit production, and farms like Ramsey's farm, I think you could have a real interesting agricultural renaissance, if that's not already what's going on. And I guess I'll end by saying, that these things are good for nature too. We talked about it, how it attracts wildlife. And that's something else we're really into in St. Anne. So we're a monarch-friendly city, and we're a bird-friendly city. We're the first Nature Canada certified bird-friendly city in the province of Quebec. And, these things are often just labels. But it's another way for me as a counselor to convince my council to do things that's good for nature, because, they now, we're a bird-friendly city. Oh, well, we better make sure that we look like we're a real bird-friendly city, right? And, well, if you're going to build this here, well, that's going to be bad for the birds. Oh, well, but we're a bird-friendly city, So I think some of these things, they can be a little bit, what what would be the term? They can be a little bit just like window dressing and not much meat there when you kind of scratch or whatever. But they do somehow have this impact, which is good. It changes the culture of your community in a direction maybe that you would prefer. And so that's why I do some of those things. And for me, it's a joy to put up birdhouses for birds. I worked with these two old guys, George Panchuk and Jeffrey Webster, to build nest boxes for wood ducks. And then we did nest boxes for tree swallows, which are also good for bluebirds. And a lot of these birds are in trouble. And, so that's one of the reasons we're considered bird friendly. And this doesn't relate to St. Anne de Bellevue, but I wanted to point out this map here shows Cap Saint Jacques, and Ramsey's farm is over here. But Montreal owns the Parc Agricole de Bois de la Roche, and they own Cap Saint Jacques, and they've also preserved all this area. And a lot of this area is this great agricultural land. But we're trying to urge Montreal now to have a Mohawk or Ganyegahaga garden or farm project here, and now Montreal has taken all this land and grouped it together and called it the Grand Parc de l'Ouest, and they're bragging that it's the largest urban park in North America, like 4 times the size of Mount Royal or whatever. And to me, whatever, they want to be able to say that, but they kind of stretch the truth in some ways, because some of the lands are not actually protected by them or whatever. But they identified 5 different themes that they wanted to choose going forward as they turn the park into this park that will be connected by the REM, right? The electric train. The station ends in St. Anne's, just south of here, and people will be able to get off that train and enter this big, beautiful park. And one of the themes that they've chosen is an Indigenous theme. So Indigenous history, Indigenous, I don't think it's just history. It's not just Indigenous history. It's like Indigenous participation. So for me, I think there's an opening there as well to do projects maybe with Kahnawake or Kanesatake. Kanesatake is just over the water this way. I remember there was a plaque that they thankfully took down right in this bay here that I noticed when I was 18 or 19, right around the time of the Oka crisis. And it was a plaque that was saying how great it was that they killed 28 Mohawks that were coming across the water to invade like the colonists' area. And it was like to celebrate that these 28 people had been killed. I was so shocked and disturbed and disgusted by that. But eventually, I think somebody stole the plaque off for the bronze or for the medal that was there. And the government of Canada never made sure it got put back up. So that was good. So to me,
I still got the shovel.
So Montreal and the government of Canada could do a good thing by making amends for that, I mean, they have a lot to make amends for.
We have to get the one down for the massacring machine now.
Right, there's a plaque to that as well, right? Yeah. So anyways, I think, I think this is the time to be speaking to Montreal. I think Montreal is very, very open. Valerie Plante as a mayor is very open to these things. So hopefully. Yeah, and the Ploudie. So, this is one of the projects that Ramsey was talking about. Ramsey is very involved in tying this all together, the farms working together to provide food to institutions. And again, I think there's a connection for CINE, for the Center for Indigenous Nutrition and Environment with Trina Delorme. So if you know Trina, tell her that we want to talk to her. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much for listening to my talk. And I really think, I'll go to you in one sec. I really think that Kahnawake would be a great place to put up fruit trees and do this same style of thing. You have lots of land, and as I said, it can be kind of planted and forgotten about. And there's that Chinese proverb, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, but the second best time is to plant it now, right? So, get the money together and just stick some trees in this year, Yeah. Yes.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Besides St. Anne de Bellevue, because there used to be Mohawk farms all the way up the side of Mount Royal, Cotonee, the backside. I mean, it's nice to have it in one spot, but the actual regional village was closer to the mountain. And I noticed there's green areas and historical areas. You've always had Montreal, you got the mountains, you got the hills, you got a lot of downtown campuses that were bought from the religious orders. They're probably still pretty good agricultural land, but I haven't looked anything on it. And I know in other places that it's so rectally. I remember an old lady, late Addie Jacobs Mayo, she used to talk about the oral history. They used to walk from Municipal to go till their fields off Mount Royal. And in those days, it probably took them like half a day to walk.
Crazy.
And they were selling, she said, melons, corn. And you start reading all these colonial archives, they basically, those two small villages were almost feeding the entire French colony at Montreal, with no technology, no modern machinery, no. I always was amazed at how they did it. Just walking there, doing the work all day, going home and coming back.
Absolutely. To me, Mount Royal would be an obvious place as well, But I do know, like, for example, in this spot, which is Des Trois Pierres is the nonprofit group that runs that farm, the boss or the director is already said yes to having, Stephen do a project there and to hire people from Ganawage to work it. And we in St. Anne's, we have this old farmhouse from the 1800s, and the electric train station is going to stop right here. And we have an agreement with Montreal that will take care of creating a welcoming chalet, and they'll pay for land to be bought from here into the park, because the park is all here and here, but there's still some land that may be developed right around here. But this area here, we want to make like a public area. And I also think, it's one of these situations where we said it was going to get patrimonial status in a sustainable development plan, and then that night it burnt mysteriously. We didn't own it, So we went ahead and preserved it anyways, even though it's a burnt out building. But we're probably either going to restore that or we're going to build a new structure there. And for me, I also see maybe a connection with Ganawage that maybe we can work on together. And another thing maybe related to agriculture as well. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Yeah.
And this is the traditional farewell song I learned when I was a boy. Kind of goes like this. Now it's time to say goodbye to all our family. KEY. All right. I like that. So I remember one time when we had a big dance troupe and we were at the Olympics in Whiteface Mountain. They had a big summer festival and we were there. So at the end of the show, I got up and I said, now we're going to sing the farewell song. So I started. Now the entire audience sang that song. It was amazing if we would have made a recording. So anyways, wow, this was such a wonderful, beautiful gathering. I thank all of you for coming, spending the last couple days here, and the team at KCI for all the work they did in the background to help to make all this possible. I had some of the ideas, but you still need a team to make it reality. And the speakers that came. I knew them personally, so I knew what we could possibly have and make a presentation and try to cover a lot of different aspects of food sovereignty. As I always say, it's not just about growing potatoes. There's all these things that we need to know and be aware of, and we are already talking about next year, kind of similar, but different things. And because like if we love this place, and there's a small conference room downstairs, so next year maybe we're gonna organize it in a way that there'll be presentations going on down there and up here, and there may be one large area over there that it would be just all the seats. We'll have a few more companies here, and maybe because it won't be just when all the restaurant is open, so maybe all the other area there could be utilized too. Anyways, this thing to work out, but I think it went really, really well. Does anybody think it went well? Yay! I'll learn that dance that Phil Quinn did. I think it's called Walk Like an Egyptian. That's from my old Indian village days when I used to dance at Chief Poken Fire. I still know my songs and dances. Gayuwane is my favorite. You see? So now we're going to have the closing. Nagani ni hagahiwe, ne am de hadaswa, gan hoden the hodeli what daje, ne degini yaldum, ne wini sarage. So now it's time to come to close the affairs of the last 2 days. So sagona herzi.
What's going on? Where are the harde? Sagorezi ni waksanoda. And now I just ask you again, just like yesterday, if you don't understand what's being said, just put your mind together with all of us, that we're giving thanks and paying respect to all the things of the natural world, that we continue to work together and do the original instructions that the Creator gave all of us to do. And the last part of it that I'm going to say as well is we're going to separate our minds at the end, because we all have to go home back to our families, and while we're traveling, that we're safe and that nobody is harmed. So, Ganjokwa is awada gon is awada hunsios, they got nigari wesa, they got the gun water dunserda, on get one no headstone. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne ngwe sunta. Ti sego awada wise, wajat the road again. Togadi nayo to no wat nigorda. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne yunki ni sta, ti hunzade. Ti sego yunki sat stanser always. Togadi nayo to no wat nigorda. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne gahne garunyo. Ti sego gahne gio awado aiza wahne girda ne dosonkak. Agyagon yak data. Togadi nayo to no wat nigorda. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne gandu sunta. Ti sego wado ayeda wage ne audi wardo. Dano dosa unkak ayundun gariake. Togadi nayo to no wat nigorda. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne ohunde sunta, dano oterda sunta. Togadi nayo to no wat nigorda. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne jun hekwa. Nene asani gunda dinoza, onaste, oza heda dano unzerda. Ningwadera suio zi sego wado ayeda wage, ne ga kuio wahi. Togadi nayo to no wat nigorda. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne gahi sunta. Dano ne agwa de gwawana ne got ni hundesa. Sego wado ayeda wage, dano aiza wahne girda ne ganigida gatu. Togadi nayo to no wat nigorda. Agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no wat nigorda, dano de yetino wardado ne onukwa sunta. Sego wado ayeda watste, no nukak ayagunu waktani hage. ti saha ay ago da karide to gadi na yo tu nguat ni gorda gwe gonska de wahwe nuni no nguat ni gorda dano dia tinu wordado ne gundirio dano gario da sun'a dano nene no guati guari guana ne uskenundu si sego wadu audi wardu ay da wage dano audi neho ay da watste to gadi na yo tu nguat ni gorda agwe gonska de wahwe nuni no nguat ni gorda dano dia tinu wordado ne garunda sun'a dano ogure sun'a dano nene guati guari guana ne wata ni garundoda ona ni gahawi nuwa ne aiza wa ne garordige ne orun dugani wata dugari awadu aiza wa ne gira ne zaha asat stancer ayandige to gari na yo dunu wat ni gorda agwego anskan de wa wet nuni ni wat ni gorda dano dia tinu wordado ne odzinu wa sun'a ti sego rodio dade di unzage ahadi wadagwa ne o garna ti saha ayo da garide dano au de hiardo ne gayan tosira to gari na yo tu wat ni gorda gwe gonska de wa wet nuni no wat ni gorda dano de tinu wordano ne ozita ogu ti sego gardanio aiza watune ne or hungeni ni gahawi awado aiza wat gatu ne ahadije ne gardan hiage dano saha skana aiza wanu tunyu hage dano nene agwahti guari gowana ne agwex dagani ne adunyu goa to gari na yotu no gwat ni gorda agwego anska ndir wahwe nuni no gwat ni gorda dano de tinu wordado ne gairi ni guairage o terdege ni guadi ti ate wat santos ti gari gwinigas dano anje ni guadi sego rodio daje dano yo werda daje sego yung guarda sui o di gairi ni wagan ho di yung guaya nene gagwi dene agan hage ganana gene dano ago serage ni gahawi to gadi na yo no wat ni gorda agwego anska de wat we nuni no wat ni gorda dano dia tinu wordado ne yung kisota sunta neka garakwa ti sego yago yo daje dano de yago swate dun dio dade to gari na yo tunu wat ni gorda agwego anskan de wahwe nuni ni wat ni gorda dano dia tinu wordano ne yuki so togo radi werdas ti sego radi ne gahawi dano gahne gio sego yiguaya to gari na yo tunu wat ni gorda agwego anskan de wahwe nuni ni wat ni gorda dano don chiru wanu wordado ne sungwat jia jo kanaka garakwa sego de hoswate do na ro dirty hard und die hundade dan no sego wado on die hard ne gayan tosira to gari na yo tu no gwat ni gorda we go anskan de wahwe nuni no gwat ni gorda dan no dia tinu wordado ne yo di stop wordun yo di karun hiade sego de hoswate do dan no awado aiza wat gato ti oskat stenyu ti karun hiage is in not karun yadi to gari na yo tu no gwat ni gorda agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no gwat ni gorda dano de tinu wordado ne gairi ni hunungwedige ti sego rodio daje di hundade dano ti karunhiade ne dosonkak ayagre wate to gari na yo tu no gwat ni gorda dano de agwego anskan de wahwe nuni no gwat ni gorda dano don chiru no wordado ni sungwayatisu ti sego yo yanaraje agwego rosa ayu dano rodadi wena daon ti onzade dano ti karunhiade to gari na yo tu no gwat ni gorda dano eto nu dat gaderi wat gwene ti no hoda I gari wena dakwa to gatena tena zunget ni gorha ize gine one zaze wagwado go hadu dano ne ona kakadu yuri hawana di agwahrori ayawa skana gasat stansina dano gat ni go rio agahage ti nuwe dan za wats di gafa ti ohunzade dano ayawa ti agwego na hoda ze wadewi astu ne de wani zarage ni gardiwes awado aida wats de ti nuwe cedardum dano eto ni go wanage dano ona eto. So the last little part too that I added was that I hope that when you go home, you all have the great peace, a good mind, and the power of unity to bring back everything you've learned to your communities and to use it for good to help all the people. And y'all again for having me here to speak. I'm very honored.